sacred narration unfolds from the timeless wisdom of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, one of the most revered texts in Sanatan Dharma. Within it lies Skanda 8, a profound chapter that reveals the great cosmic event of the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of existence. This is episode 13, Panchajanya, the sacred conch of Vishnu, the sacred sound that awakens the soul. From the depths of the ocean of milk came treasures of extraordinary beauty and power. Some brought nourishment, some brought prosperity, some revealed beauty, desire, healing, or spiritual wisdom. Each emergence carried not only a place within the sacred story of the Samudra Manthan, but also a teaching for human life. Yet traditional accounts of the treasures that arose from the ocean of milk do not always preserve exactly the same list. In some enumerations, the sacred conch of Lord Vishnu is counted among the 14 Ratnas. The Shrimad Bhagavatam, however, does not describe the named conch Panchajanya emerging during the churning in Skanda 8. Its earthly story is narrated later in Skanda 10 during the life of Lord Krishna. Yet the conch is one of the eternal emblems of Lord Vishnu. It therefore remains deeply connected with the teachings of preservation, protection, awakening, and Dharma that unfold through the Samudra Manthan. Lord Vishnu is commonly shown holding 4 sacred emblems: the conch, the discus, the mace, and the lotus. Each reveals something about the divine responsibilities of the preserver. The Sudarshana chakra represents divine order, clarity, and the power that cuts through adharma. The Kaumudaki Gada represents strength, authority, and the power required to uphold righteousness. The lotus represents purity, spiritual awakening, and the ability to remain untouched by the impurities surrounding us. And the conch represents sacred sound. It is the call to awaken. It is the proclamation of Dharma. It is the assurance that divine protection remains present even when darkness appears to have become powerful. The conch rests silently in the hand of the Lord. By itself, it makes no announcement. It carries no argument, command, or personal message. But when divine breath passes through its empty chamber, silence becomes sound. That sound expands outward. It travels across temples and sacred ceremonies. It crosses kingdoms and battlefields. It enters the ears, gathers the wandering mind, and calls the human heart to attention. In this simple movement, from silence, through divine breath, into sacred sound, we find one of the deepest mysteries of Panchajanya. The conch is empty, yet it is not useless. Its emptiness gives it purpose. Because it does not obstruct the breath passing through it, it becomes an instrument through which the presence of the divine may be announced. Perhaps the human being is also called to become such an instrument, not empty of intelligence, not empty of personality, not empty of courage or responsibility, but empty of the pride that insists, only my voice matters, only my desires must prevail, only my understanding can be correct. When ego becomes quieter, something purer may begin to move through us. Truth may pass through our words. Compassion may pass through our actions. Courage may arise without hatred. Service may be offered without the constant need for recognition. The conch therefore asks us a profound question. What passes through us into the world? When we speak, do we spread peace or hostility? Do our words bring clarity, or do they deepen confusion? Do we awaken courage in others, or do we weaken them through fear? Do we protect truth, or do we repeat whatever reaches our ears without discernment? Sound is everywhere. The modern world is filled with voices competing for attention. News, advertising, social media, arguments, opinions, warnings, accusations, and promises surround us from morning until night. Yet noise is not the same as sacred sound. The loudest voice is not always the truest. The most frequently repeated claim is not always wisdom. A voice may excite the mind without enlightening it. It may provoke fear without offering direction. It may gather followers while leading them away from truth. Panchajanya asks us to listen more deeply. It asks us to recognize the difference between a sound that agitates the mind and a sound that awakens the soul. The divine call may not always be loud. Sometimes it arrives through scripture, sometimes through prayers, sometimes through the words of a sincere teacher, sometimes through the advice of someone who sees what we have been unwilling to see. Sometimes it comes through suffering that forces us to reconsider the direction of our life. And sometimes, in a moment of stillness, it is heard as a quiet recognition within the heart. This path is no longer right for you. This truth can no longer be ignored. Something must change. You must rise. Most people are not physically asleep as they move through the day. Yet spiritual sleep can continue even while the body remains busy. We can work, speak, travel, plan, and fulfill responsibilities without ever asking where our choices are leading. We can live through habit. We can remain trapped by fear. We can follow social expectations without examining whether they are consistent with Dharma. We can postpone necessary decisions while telling ourselves that there will always be more time. But there are moments when life sounds an inner conch. The time for drifting comes to an end. The time for avoidance comes to an end. The soul is asked to become present. Panchajanya represents that moment. Its call does not merely say, listen. It says, awaken, remember who you are. Examine what you are becoming. Recognize what your conscience has been trying to tell you. And prepare to act according to Dharma. The conch of Lord Vishnu is therefore both gentle and powerful. To the sincere heart, its sound offers reassurance. It declares that the divine has not abandoned creation. Dharma has not disappeared. Truth has not lost its power. Darkness has not gained permanent victory. But to those who knowingly choose injustice, the same sound becomes a warning. Consequences are approaching. The period of concealment will not last forever. What has been created through repeated choices must eventually be faced. This meaning becomes especially powerful when Panchajanya is sounded by Lord Krishna upon the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Before the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, the conch is heard. Before Arjuna receives instruction, he must confront his crisis. Before clarity comes, confusion must be revealed. Before a new understanding can arise, the old confidence must be shaken. First comes awakening, then comes instruction. Yet Panchajanya's earthly story does not begin at Kurukshetra. It begins earlier, after Krishna and Balarama completed their education under the revered teacher Sandipani Muni. It begins with Guru Seva. It begins with gratitude. It begins with a promise to restore a teacher's lost son. The journey takes Krishna beneath the waters, into an encounter with the being called Panchajana, and onward to the realm of Yamaraja. There, the conch is sounded, and a child believed to be lost to death is returned to his grieving parents. Before Panchajanya announced the beginning of a great war, it sounded during a mission of restoration. Before it became associated with armies, it was connected with duty to a teacher. Before it proclaimed the crisis of Kurukshetra, it had already carried a message of courage, service, and life renewed. The sacred conch therefore contains many teachings. It is the sound of awakening. It is the call of conscience. It is the courage to stand for truth. It is the purification of speech. It is the gathering of the scattered senses. It is the warning that inaction also carries consequences. It is the reassurance that divine protection does not always remove struggle, but can give us the strength to pass through struggle without losing our soul. And it is the invitation to become an instrument through which truth compassion, and Dharma may enter the world. In the previous episode, the Kaustubha Mani revealed the jewel of purity that rests within the heart. Now, Panchajanya carries that teaching forward. Kaustubha Mani represents purity in the heart. Panchajanya represents the sacred voice and courageous action that arise from that purity. For purity must eventually find expression. A pure heart should influence how we speak. It should guide the choices we make. It should strengthen us when truth requires courage. It should make our actions more compassionate, not more self-righteous. It should help us recognize when silence is wisdom and when silence has become surrender to injustice. Panchajanya does not call us toward aggression, it calls us toward readiness. It does not ask us to speak constantly. It asks us to make our speech sacred. It does not ask us to fight every disagreement. It asks us to recognize the moments when Dharma requires a response. And it does not promise that following the call will always be comfortable. Awakening may require us to leave behind familiar patterns. It may require us to question voices we once trusted. It may ask us to plant the tree now, rather than waiting until we desperately need its shade. It may require the acceptance that a purpose-filled life cannot be lived entirely through avoidance. The sacred conch is therefore not only an object held by Lord Vishnu, it is also a symbol of something that may be heard within every sincere seeker. A call towards truth, a call towards courage, a call towards service, a call towards the purpose for which this life has been given. Why did a simple shell become one of the most powerful symbols of Sanatan Dharma? Why is it sounded at the beginning of worship? Why did Lord Krishna sound Panchajanya before the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita began? What does its sacred vibration reveal about speech, conscience, courage, protection, and the choices we make? And when the conch sounds within our own life, will we recognize its call? Will we continue sleeping, or will we rise? This is the sacred mystery of Panchajanya, the divine sound that calls the soul to awaken. Section 1. What is Panchajanya? Lord Vishnu is often recognized by the 4 sacred emblems held in his hands: the conch, the discus, the mace, and the lotus. These are not merely ornaments. Each reveals an aspect of the Lord's divine power, responsibility, and relationship with creation. Together, they express preservation, protection, spiritual awakening, and the maintenance of Dharma. The discus is known as the Sudarshan Chakra. It represents divine vision, order, and the power that cuts through confusion and adharma. The word Sudarshan may be understood as auspicious or clear vision. It reminds us that divine perception is not clouded by prejudice, fear, attachment, or incomplete knowledge. Human beings often see only a small part of a situation. We judge according to what is visible to us. We may misunderstand motives. We may act upon rumors. We may confuse our preferences with truth. But divine vision sees the whole. The Sudarshan Chakra therefore represents not only the power to destroy evil, but also the clarity required to distinguish truth from distortion. The mace is known as Kaumodaki. It represents strength, authority, and the power required to uphold righteousness. Dharma cannot always be protected through gentle words alone. There are moments when strength is required. Yet divine strength is not uncontrolled aggression. It is disciplined. It is purposeful. It is guided by wisdom. The mace reminds us that power becomes sacred only when it protects rather than dominates. Strength without dharma can become cruelty. Authority without humility can become oppression. But strength guided by righteousness can protect the vulnerable, establish order, and prevent injustice from spreading. The lotus represents purity and spiritual unfolding. It grows from water and mud, yet its petals remain beautiful and unstained. For this reason, the lotus has become one of the most profound symbols of spiritual life. It teaches that purity does not require complete escape from the world. The sincere seeker may live among difficulty, disappointment, temptation, and conflict without allowing those conditions to define the heart. The lotus does not deny the mud from which it grows, it rises through it. In the same way, spiritual maturity does not mean pretending that suffering, injustice, or human weakness do not exist. It means allowing wisdom, compassion, and devotion to grow through them. The lotus also unfolds gradually. Its petals do not open all at once. This reflects the way spiritual understanding often develops. The soul is not awakened through force. It opens through experience, prayer, reflection, discipline, and grace. Then there is the conch, the sacred shankha. The particular conch associated with Lord Krishna is called Panchajanya. Unlike the sharp movement of the chakra or the visible strength of the mace, the conch appears gentle. It is a shell. It has no blade. It cannot strike. It rests silently within the hand of the Lord. Yet, when it is sounded, its vibration travels far beyond the place in which it is held. It announces, it awakens, it gathers attention, it marks the movement from one state into another. Before worship begins, the conch may be sounded. Before an auspicious undertaking, the conch may be heard. Before the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita begins, Lord Krishna sounds Panchajanya. Its meaning is therefore not based upon physical force. Its power lies in sacred communication. Panchajanya represents the divine call entering creation. It announces that the Lord is present. It proclaims that Dharma must be remembered. It tells the wandering mind that the time for distraction has ended. It tells the fearful heart that divine protection remains. And it warns those who knowingly follow adharma that their actions will not remain without consequence. The conch may therefore carry different meanings for different listeners. To the devotee, it may sound like reassurance. To the confused, it may sound like guidance. To the spiritually sleeping, it may sound like awakening. To the person avoiding responsibility, it may sound like a summons. And to those who misuse power, it may sound like a warning. The sound itself does not change. What changes is the condition of the listener. The same truth may comfort one person and unsettle another. The same call may inspire courage in one heart and resistance in another. The same teaching may be welcomed by someone seeking transformation and rejected by someone determined to remain unchanged. This is why Panchajanya is more than a musical instrument. It is a symbol of truth being announced. Truth does not always enter life quietly. Sometimes it arrives through a moment that interrupts our plans. Sometimes it appears through a difficult conversation. Sometimes it reaches us through scripture. Sometimes through loss. Sometimes through an inner uneasiness that refuses to disappear. The call may say, "Pay attention. Something is no longer in harmony. You cannot continue indefinitely in the same direction." The conch therefore represents the movement from unconscious living into awareness. It calls us to examine not only what we are doing, but why we are doing it. Are our choices guided by Dharma? Are we acting from fear? Are we seeking approval? Are we following habit because change feels difficult? Are we remaining silent because silence is wise? Or because we are afraid? Panchajanya asks the listener to become present. The sacred conch is also associated with protection. Yet divine protection should not be understood only as escape from hardship. Life may still contain illness, grief, opposition, and uncertainty. The devotee may still be tested. The conch does not promise that every difficulty will immediately disappear. Its deeper assurance is that the divine remains present within the struggle. Protection may arrive as strength. It may arrive as discernment. It may arrive as the courage to leave a harmful situation. It may arrive as the right person appearing at the right moment. It may arrive as the ability to endure without losing faith, dignity, or compassion. Panchajanya therefore announces both presence and possibility. It says that darkness is not the whole story. It says that confusion need not be permanent. It says that a person who has forgotten their purpose can still awaken. It says that one truthful decision can begin to redirect a life. When we look at the four emblems of Lord Vishnu together, a complete spiritual picture begins to emerge. The lotus teaches purity, the discourse teaches clarity, the mace teaches discipline, strength, the conch teaches sacred expression. Purity without clarity may become naive. Clarity without compassion may become harsh. Strength without restraint may become destructive. And truth that is never expressed may remain unable to serve the world. The four emblems therefore belong together. The lotus keeps the heart pure. The chakra keeps perception clear. The mace gives the strength to uphold what is right. And the conch gives voice to Dharma. This is especially important after the teaching of the Kaustubha Mani. Kaustubha Mani rested upon the heart of Lord Vishnu. It represented purity, truth, and the divine light within. Panchajanya rests within the Lord's hand. It represents the moment when inner purity begins to move outward through speech, courage, and action. The heart is purified, the mind becomes clearer, strength becomes disciplined. Then the conch is sounded. This order matters. Panchajanya does not merely ask us to speak or act. It asks whether our words and actions arise from sincerity, humility, and Dharma. A voice that arises from an impure heart may spread anger, pride, or confusion. A voice driven by ego may speak loudly while claiming to defend truth. But when speech arises from sincerity, humility, and discernment, it can become sacred. Panchajanya therefore does not merely ask us to speak. It asks us to purify the source from which our speech arises. It does not merely ask us to act. It asks whether our action is guided by Dharma. It does not merely ask us to be courageous. It asks whether courage is being used to protect, heal, and awaken, or to control and injure. The sacred conch of Lord Vishnu carries no selfish message of its own. It becomes powerful when divine breath moves through it. This image will become increasingly important as our journey continues. For now, Panchajanya may be understood as four things. It is sacred sound. It is the call to awaken. It is the announcement of divine protection. And it is the proclamation that Dharma must be remembered and upheld. The conch is silent until it is sounded. The soul may also remain silent until something awakens it. And when that moment comes, life can no longer be lived in quite the same way. Section 2. How Lord Krishna received Panchajanya. The earthly story of Panchajanya is narrated in the 10th skanda of the Shrimad Bhagavatam. It begins not upon a battlefield, but within the sacred relationship between a teacher and his students. After Lord Krishna and Lord Balarama had completed their education, they approached their revered teacher, Sandipani Muni. Although Krishna is the source of all knowledge and Balarama is his divine brother, they accepted the discipline of student life. They lived according to the customs of the Gurukula. They listened, they learned, they served their teacher, and when their education was complete, they did not simply take their knowledge and depart. They asked what they could offer as Guru Dakshina. Guru Dakshina is more than a payment for lessons received. It is an expression of gratitude. It acknowledges that knowledge is not merely information taken from another person. A genuine teacher gives time, discipline, experience, correction, and guidance. The student therefore asks, how may I honor what has been given to me? What may I offer in return? Sandipani Muni considered the request together with his wife. They did not ask for wealth. They did not ask for land, cattle, jewels, or public recognition. They remembered their son. Their child had been lost near the sacred coastal region of Prabhasa. He had entered the ocean and had not returned. Their request to Krishna and Balarama was therefore extraordinary. They asked the two brothers to bring back their son. For an ordinary student, such a request would have appeared impossible. How could a child believed to be dead be restored? How could anyone enter the depths of the ocean, discover what had happened, and return the boy to his grieving parents? Yet Krishna and Balarama did not hesitate. They accepted the request of their guru. They mounted their chariot and travel led to Prabhasa, where the waters of the ocean stretched before them. When they reached the shore, Lord Krishna called upon the presiding deity of the ocean. The ocean appeared before the Lord with reverence and offered worship. Krishna then commanded him to return the son of his spiritual teacher, believing that the child had been taken by the ocean's powerful waves. But the ocean explained that he had not taken the boy. A mighty being named Panchajanya lived within the waters. Panchajanya was described as moving through the ocean in the form of a great conch. It was this being, the ocean said, who had taken Sandipani Muni's son. Upon hearing this, Lord Krishna entered the ocean. The waters that concealed their depths from ordinary human sight could not conceal anything from him. There, beneath the waves, Krishna found Panchajanya. The Lord confronted and defeated him. Yet, when Krishna searched the being's body, he did not find Sandipani Muni's son within it. The first possibility had failed. The boy was not there. But Krishna did not abandon the promise he had made. He took the conch that had grown around or arisen from the body of Panchajanya and returned to the chariot where Balarama was waiting. The scripture later identifies the conch taken from Panchajanya as Panchajanya. Krishna and Balarama then continued their journey beyond the world ordinarily reached by human beings. They traveled to Samyamani, the city of Yamaraja. Yamaraja is the guardian of justice and the Lord who governs the destination of embodied beings after death according to the consequences of their actions. Krishna's search had therefore moved through several realms. First, he had traveled from the Gurukula to Prabhasa, then from the shore into the depths of the ocean, and now from the human world into the realm associated with death and judgment. Upon reaching Samyamani, Lord Krishna raised the conch and sounded it. For the first time within this sacred story, the voice of Panchajanya resounded. Its vibration entered the city of Yamaraja. This was no ordinary signal. The sound announced that the Supreme Lord had arrived. Yamaraja heard the mighty resonance and immediately came forward. Recognizing Krishna and Balarama, he worshipped them with great devotion. Though the two brothers appeared to be human students carrying out the request of their teacher, Yamaraja recognized their divine identity. He bowed before them and asked how he might serve. Lord Krishna then spoke of Sandipani Muni's son. The boy had been brought into Yamaraja's realm through the results of his own past karma, but Krishna now commanded that he be returned. The Lord had accepted the restoration of the child as Guru Dakshina, and therefore the boy was to be released without delay. Yamaraja obeyed. Sandipani Muni's son was brought before Krishna and Balarama. The child who had entered the ocean and vanished from the human world was now restored. The two divine brothers placed him upon their chariot and began the journey back to their guru. One can imagine Sandipani Muni and his wife waiting. Perhaps they had wondered whether their request had been too great. Perhaps hope and grief struggled within them. They had entrusted Krishna and Balarama with a sorrow that no ordinary gift could heal. Then the chariot returned, and upon it was their son. The child they believed had been taken forever was brought back alive. Krishna and Balarama presented him to their teacher as Guru Dakshina. Having restored the son of their Guru, they asked whether anything further was required. Sandipani Muni was deeply satisfied. What greater offering could a teacher and grieving father receive? The students had not merely honored his instruction, they had entered the ocean, crossed into the realm of death, and returned what had been lost. This is how the sacred conch called Panchajanya entered the manifested earthly Leela of Lord Krishna. Its story begins with a promise. It begins with respect for a teacher. It begins with the willingness to accept a difficult duty without searching for excuses. And it begins with a journey undertaken to relieve the sorrow of others. This is important because Panchajanya is often remembered primarily in connection with the battlefield of Kurukshetra. We remember Lord Krishna sounding it before the beginning of the Great War. We associate its voice with courage, readiness, and the proclamation of Dharma. But before Panchajanya sounded upon a battlefield, it sounded in the realm of Yamaraja. Before it announced the beginning of conflict, it announced the arrival of the Lord on a mission of restoration. Before it was heard by assembled armies, it was connected with the recovery of a teacher's child. Its earthly history is therefore not rooted only in warfare. It is rooted in Guru Seva. It is rooted in gratitude. It is rooted in the fulfillment of a sacred obligation. And it is rooted in the restoration of life and hope. There is also a deeper teaching within Krishna's refusal to abandon the search. When he entered the ocean and defeated Panchajanya, the missing boy was not found. For an ordinary person, this might have appeared to be the end of the journey. The expected answer had not been found where it was supposed to be. The first explanation had proved incomplete. But Lord Krishna continued. He did not confuse one unsuccessful step with the failure of the entire purpose. He moved onward until the promise was fulfilled. Human beings often begin a worthy task with enthusiasm. But when the first attempt does not succeed, doubt appears. Perhaps the path is wrong. Perhaps the goal is impossible. Perhaps we should turn back. This story reminds us that the first obstacle does not always mean we have been asked to abandon the journey. Sometimes it means that greater courage, patience, or understanding is required. The child was not found within Panchajanya, but the search continued beyond the ocean. The answer existed in another realm. The fulfillment of duty required Krishna and Balarama to travel further than the first explanation had suggested. There is also significance in the way Krishna and Balarama honored their teacher. Though divine, they did not behave as if their greatness placed them above gratitude. They demonstrated that true knowledge should make a person more humble, not less. Learning should not produce arrogance. It should deepen responsibility. A person may accumulate scriptures, qualifications, skills, and eloquent speech. But what has that knowledge produced within the heart? Has it increased respect? Has it inspired service? Has it made the person more truthful and dependable? Has it created gratitude toward those who offered guidance? Knowledge that strengthens ego without awakening responsibility remains incomplete. Krishna and Balarama showed that education reaches fulfillment when it is joined with humility and service. Panchajanya therefore entered their hands through an act of duty completed with devotion. The conch was not acquired as a trophy. Krishna did not enter the ocean because he desired a powerful object. He entered because his guru had asked for the return of his son. Panchajanya came into the Lord's earthly possession while he was fulfilling a promise made to another. This gives the conch a sacred moral foundation. Its voice is not the voice of selfish ambition, it is the voice of responsibility. It is the voice that says, a promise has been made, a duty has been accepted, the journey must be completed. The suffering of others must not be treated lightly, and knowledge must be returned to the world through service. There is another beautiful contrast within this story. A conch is ordinarily associated with the ocean. Its form develops within the hidden world beneath the water. Yet this conch eventually becomes the instrument through which Lord Krishna's presence is announced far beyond the ocean. Something formed in darkness becomes a carrier of sacred sound. Something taken from the depths becomes an emblem held in the hand of the divine. This is also a teaching for human life. Our most difficult experiences may occur in places that feel dark, hidden, or overwhelming. At the time, we may not understand what can emerge from them. But suffering does not always produce only pain. When passed through with wisdom, faith, and integrity, it may produce a voice capable of helping others. The depth that once frightened us may become the place from which courage is born. The grief that once silenced us may eventually teach us how to comfort. The injustice we survived may awaken the strength to protect someone else. The ocean does not cease to be deep, but from its depths, a sacred conch may emerge. Panchajanya was taken from the waters. It was sounded in the realm of death. And through the command of Lord Krishna, a child was restored to life with his parents. The conch therefore carries a message stronger than fear. Death is powerful within the human experience. Laws can change the shape of a family forever. Yet the sounding of Panchajanya in Yamaraja's city announces that even death remains within the greater order of the divine. Yamaraja himself responds to the Lord. He worships, he listens, and he obeys. Panchajanya does not deny death. It announces that death is not greater than God. For the grieving heart, this does not remove the pain of separation, but it offers a deeper assurance. Life is not held only within the limits visible to human eyes. The soul is not reduced to the body, and the divine presence reaches even into the realms we fear most. Thus, Panchajanya's earthly story begins with far more than the acquisition of a conch. It begins with a teacher's grief, a student's promise, a descent into the ocean, an encounter with Panchajana, a journey to the city of Yamaraja, the sounding of sacred vibration within the realm of death, and the restoration of a lost child. Later, Panchajanya will sound again. Its voice will travel over Kurukshetra. It will announce that the time has come for Arjuna to face duty, grief, fear, and moral confusion. But the conch already carries a history. It has already proclaimed devotion to the Guru. It has already demonstrated perseverance. It has already entered darkness without becoming overcome by it. And it has already announced that divine purpose can travel where ordinary human strength cannot. Before Panchajanya became the call to battle, it was the sound of a promise fulfilled. Before it proclaimed Dharma to the world, it arose through gratitude and service. And before it awakened Arjuna, it brought hope back to the home of a grieving teacher. Section 3. The meaning of the name Panchajanya. The name Panchajanya carries more than one layer of meaning. Within the earthly story of Lord Krishna, the conch is directly associated with Panchajana, the powerful being whom Krishna encountered beneath the ocean. The Shrimad Bhagavatam describes Panchajana as an asura who moved through the water in the form of a conch. After defeating him, Krishna took the conch that had grown from or was associated with his body. It later became known as Panchajanya. This is the clearest narrative explanation of the conch's name within Krishna's Leela. Yet the Sanskrit name also invites a wider spiritual reflection. The word Pancha means five. The term Panchajanya has also been interpreted in Sanskrit tradition as relating to the five people or five classes of beings. It is therefore important not to suggest that every symbolic meaning involving the number 5 is the single literal origin of the name. Nevertheless, The number 5 carries deep significance throughout Sanatan Dharma. Human experience is organized through many groups of 5. There are the 5 great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. The physical body is formed from these elements. Earth gives solidity, water gives fluidity, fire gives warmth, transformation, and digestion. Air gives movement. Space provides the field within which all other elements operate. Everything we touch, build, consume, and physically experience arises through different combinations of these 5. There are also the 5 senses of perception: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Through them, the outer world enters our awareness. The eyes receive form and color. The ears receive sound. The nose receives fragrance. The tongue receives taste. The skin receives contact, temperature, and texture. The senses allow us to experience the beauty and richness of creation. Yet, they can also scatter the mind. What we see may awaken comparison. What we hear may influence us before we have tested whether it is true. What we taste may become craving. What we touch may create attachment. What attracts the senses may begin to govern the direction of life. There are also 5 principal organs of action. Through the voice, we speak. Through the hands, we grasp, create, and serve. Through the feet, we move toward one path or another. The remaining organs carry out the physical processes through which the body releases waste and participates in the continuation of life. These powers of action remind us that spiritual life is not contained only within thought. What the mind accepts eventually finds expression through the body. An intention becomes speech, a belief becomes action, a desire becomes movement, a repeated choice becomes a habit, and habit gradually shapes character. Sanatan philosophy also speaks of 5 principal vital energies, commonly known as the 5 pranas. These energies support breathing, circulation, digestion, elimination, movement, and the many subtle functions through which life is maintained. Although they perform different roles, they belong to one living system. When they work harmoniously, the body and mind are supported. When harmony is disturbed, the whole person may feel the effect. There are also teachings concerning 5 sheets or layers through which the individual experiences embodied existence. The physical layer is sustained by food. The vital layer carries energy. The mental layer receives impressions and emotions. The intellectual layer discerns, understands, and chooses. And the innermost sheath is connected with a subtler experience of peace and bliss. Beyond all these layers remains the true self, the Atman, which is not limited by the temporary coverings through which human life is experienced. These groupings of 5 should not be forced into the literal origin story of Panchajanya, but they help us understand why the symbolism of 5 can be so spiritually powerful. The divine call must reach the whole person. It is not enough for the ear alone to hear sacred sound. The eyes must learn to see with greater purity. The tongue must learn to speak with discipline. The hands must learn to serve. The feet must learn to walk away from adharma and move toward what is right. The mind must become less scattered. The intellect must practice discernment. The vital energies must be directed rather than wasted. And the physical body must become an instrument through which Dharma can be lived. Panchajanya therefore does not merely call one isolated part of us to awaken. Its vibration symbolically travels through the whole being. It calls the body, it calls the senses, it calls the mind, it calls the conscience, it calls the voice, and it calls the capacity for action. A person may hear many spiritual teachings without being transformed. The ears may listen while the habits remain unchanged. The mouth may repeat sacred words while continuing to injure others. The mind may understand what is right while the hands refuse to act. The intellect may recognize a harmful path while fear prevents the feet from leaving it. This is incomplete listening. The sound has reached the ear, but it has not yet entered the whole person. Panchajanya asks for something deeper. It asks whether the teaching has entered our way of seeing. Has it changed how we interpret another person's suffering? Has it changed what we allow ourselves to say? Has it changed how we use our strength? Has it changed what we pursue through the senses? Has it changed the decisions we make when no one is watching? A sacred teaching becomes alive only when it passes from hearing into practice. The conch sounds outwardly for only a few moments, but its true purpose is fulfilled when the vibration continues inwardly through the choices that follow. There is another beautiful connection between Panchajanya and the senses. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna is called Hrishikesha, the Lord of the senses, when he sounds Panchajanya. The verse identifies Krishna's conch as Panchajanya and describes Arjuna and Bhima sounding their own conches beside him. This title is significant. The Lord of the senses sounds the conch that calls the senses to order. Arjuna is about to be overwhelmed by what he sees. He will look across the battlefield and recognize teachers, relatives, friends, and loved ones. His sight will awaken grief. His mind will become confused. His body will tremble. His strength will appear to leave him. The senses will report a painful reality, but Arjuna will not yet know how to interpret it through Dharma. Panchajanya sounds before this crisis fully unfolds. It calls attention to the need for mastery. The senses provide information, but they do not always provide wisdom. The eyes can see a situation without understanding the whole truth. The ears can hear an accusation without knowing whether it is just. The mind can experience fear without proving that danger is present. Desire can feel urgent without being beneficial. Discomfort can feel wrong even when it accompanies necessary growth. For this reason, the senses require guidance. They are valuable servants, but unreliable masters. The sacred conch represents the call that gathers them beneath a higher purpose. The eyes are not asked to become blind. They are asked to see with discernment. The ears are not asked to close. They are asked to distinguish truth from manipulation. The tongue is not asked to remain permanently silent. It is asked to speak with honesty and compassion. The hands are not asked to become inactive. They are asked to serve without harming. The feet are not asked to stop moving. They are asked to choose their direction wisely. Thus, the symbolism of five leads us toward wholeness. Spiritual awakening is not limited to prayer performed at a particular hour. It must gradually influence every layer of life. How we eat, how we speak, how we listen, how we respond to temptation, how we use our body, how we treat those who cannot benefit us, how we act when fear and duty pull in different directions, and how we carry sacred teachings from the place of worship into ordinary life. The name Panchajanya first reminds us of Panchajana and the story through which Krishna received the conch. But the sound of that name can also awaken a wider reflection. Every dimension of the human being must eventually be brought into harmony with Dharma. The sacred call cannot stop at the ears. It must travel into thought, from thought into speech, from speech into action, and from repeated action into character. Only then has the whole person heard. Only then has the call truly been answered. Section 4. The conch and the primordial sound. Before a word is spoken, there is vibration. Before thought becomes speech, something first moves within the mind. Before action appears in the world, intention begins in silence. For this reason, sacred traditions have long understood sound as more than noise. Sound can announce. Sound can gather attention. Sound can disturb. Sound can soothe, and sacred sound can redirect the mind toward the divine. The deep resonance of the conch is often compared with the vibration of Om. This does not mean that the conch and Om are identical. Rather, the conch reminds us of the movement from silence into sacred sound. Its vibration begins at one point, then expands outward. In the same way, creation itself is often understood as unfolding from subtle vibration into visible form. Panchajanya therefore becomes a symbol of awakening. Its sound interrupts distraction. It calls the mind back from scattered thought. It reminds the listener that something sacred is beginning. The conch does not create truth, it announces what is already present. Likewise, spiritual teaching does not manufacture the soul's divine nature. It reveals what has been hidden beneath fear, habit, and forgetfulness. A person may spend years searching outside for something that has always remained quietly present within. The sacred sound does not place the light there. It calls attention to it. This is why the conch is so powerful as a spiritual symbol. Its vibration reaches the ear, but its purpose is to awaken the heart. For a moment, ordinary noise is interrupted. The mind becomes attentive. The soul is asked to remember. Panchajanya teaches that awakening often begins with such an interruption. A familiar pattern is disturbed. A question appears. A truth can no longer be ignored. Silence gives way to sound, and sound becomes the beginning of transformation. Section 5. Why the conch is blown in worship. The conch is sounded during puja, arati, temple ceremonies, sacred festivals, and auspicious beginnings. Its sound marks a transition. Ordinary activity pauses. The wandering mind is called back. The atmosphere becomes attentive. The conch announces the time of worship has begun. Leave distraction behind. Become present before the divine. This is why its use is more than ritual habit. The sound helps separate the sacred moment from the ordinary flow of the day. It reminds the worshipper that prayer requires more than physical presence. The mind must also arrive. In temple worship, the conch may announce divine presence. On the battlefield, it announced readiness. Within the inner life, it announces that the moment of choice has come. The meaning changes with the setting, but the central principle remains the same. Pay attention. Something important is beginning. Sacred rituals often help the mind move from restlessness into reverence. A lamp gives light, incense gathers the senses, a bell creates rhythm, and the conch opens the sacred space with its powerful vibration. Its sound reaches everyone present. It does not speak to only one person. It gathers the community into a shared moment of devotion. For a few breaths, individual worries are interrupted. Many minds turn toward one sacred center. Panchajanya therefore teaches that worship begins with attention. The divine may always be present, but the human mind is not always aware. The conch does not bring God into the room. It reminds us to recognize the presence that was already there. Section 6. The Inner Battlefield. Kurukshetra is not only an ancient battlefield, it is also a symbol of the conflicts that arise within every human being. Each day, we may stand between duty and desire, courage and fear, truth and convenience, forgiveness and resentment, selflessness and ego, wisdom and social pressure. Panchajanya sounds within us whenever conscience asks us to choose what is right rather than what is easy. Sometimes the decision is visible to everyone. At other times, no one knows that a battle is taking place. A person may appear calm while struggling inwardly with whether to speak, remain silent, leave, forgive, resist, or begin again. These hidden decisions shape character. The inner battlefield is not won through impulse. It requires discernment. Silence may sometimes preserve peace. But silence may also allow injustice to continue. Waiting may create space for wisdom, but delay may also become an excuse to avoid responsibility. Walking away may be an act of strength. Yet, in another situation, remaining present may be the greater courage. There is no single answer for every battle. Dharma asks us to examine the circumstances, our intentions, and the consequences of each choice. One truth, however, remains important. Taking no action is also an action. Refusing to decide does not remove responsibility. It simply allows events, other people, or fear to decide in our place. Panchajanya does not command us to fight every conflict. It calls us to become conscious, to recognize the battle before us, to understand what is truly at stake, and to choose with courage, clarity, and compassion. The greatest victories are not always visible. Sometimes victory means refusing to return cruelty for cruelty. Sometimes it means setting a firm boundary. Sometimes it means admitting that we were wrong. Sometimes it means standing alone rather than joining what we know is unjust. The inner conch sounds quietly. Only we may hear it. But the answer we give can change the direction of an entire life. Section 7. Why some people ignore the call. Awakening is not always comfortable. Even when we recognize that something must change, we may resist. The familiar can feel safer than the unknown, even when the familiar is painful. We may remain attached to a role we have outgrown, a group that no longer reflects our values, a habit that weakens us, a relationship that repeatedly causes harm, or an identity built upon other people's approval. Fear can make us delay, attachment can make us justify. Social pressure can make us doubt what we already know. The call of Dharma may be heard clearly, yet the mind searches for reasons not to respond. Warnings may come through conscience, scripture, wise advice, or repeated experience. But the warning does not make the decision for us. We must choose how to answer. Truth may be ignored for a time, but it cannot be permanently silenced. What we avoid inwardly often returns through consequences. The quiet whisper becomes discomfort. Discomfort becomes restlessness. And restlessness may eventually become a crisis that can no longer be dismissed. Panchajanya reminds us that the divine call continues, not to frighten us, but to awaken us before further harm is created. The seeker therefore faces a choice. Will I respond while the call is gentle? Or will I wait until life must speak more loudly? Courage does not always begin with certainty. Sometimes it begins with one honest admission. I can no longer continue in the same way. That recognition may feel like an ending, but often it is the first sound of freedom. Section 8. When Panchajanya sounds. Panchajanya is more than the sacred conch held in the hand of Lord Vishnu. It is the sound of awakening, the proclamation of Dharma, the courage to stand for truth, the purification of speech, the gathering of the senses, the reassurance of divine protection, and the call heard quietly within the human heart. Kaustubha Mani taught us that the heart must become pure. Panchajanya teaches us that purity must eventually find expression. Panchajanya reminds us that awakening does not always begin in comfort. Sometimes it begins when certainty collapses, when the familiar path no longer feels right, when silence becomes impossible, when the soul recognizes that something must change. The sacred call may arrive through prayer, through scripture, through suffering, through conscience, through the words of a wise person, or through a quiet truth that continues to return no matter how often we try to ignore it. It may say, "Wake up. Remember who you are. Look carefully at the direction of your life. Do not surrender your voice to fear. Do not surrender your judgment to noise. Do not allow another person's bitterness to become your truth." and do not postpone forever the work you already know you have been called to do. Panchajanya also teaches that divine protection does not always mean escape from hardship. Sometimes the storm remains, sometimes grief remains, sometimes opposition remains. But within the struggle, clarity may come. Strength may return. A boundary may be recognized. When Panchajanya sounds, the sleeping soul is called to rise. Fear is asked to step aside. Confusion is asked to become still. The senses are asked to gather. The voice is asked to become truthful. The heart is asked to remember its purpose. And the human being is reminded that life was not given merely to survive. It was given to awaken, to serve, to grow in wisdom, to protect what is sacred, and to live in harmony with Dharma. The conch may sound in a temple, it may sound upon a battlefield, it may sound through scripture, or it may sound so quietly within the heart that no one else can hear it. But when that sacred call comes, a choice remains. Will we turn away? Will we continue sleeping? Or will we rise and answer? May we hear the sacred conch within us, and may we have the courage, wisdom, and purity to answer its call.